A very good morning. Today is 8 July 2020. There are 4 articles of the Hindu editorial page. The first article is on Tamil Nadu custodial death, how police terror and a theatre of law. The second article is on India and China standoff, keeping an eye on nuclear ball. Third article is on US presidential race, late entrant on Kanye West entry in US presidential race. The final article is regarding India and China line of actual control, standoff, days of disengagement. This is a cartoon of the day both parties were celebrating, and in the end of the video we will be highlighting on the Neopotism, how Sushant had lost because of this. I welcome you all to Wifi Study Karo. I am Prashant. If you are first to my channel, I request you all to subscribe so that you will not miss any further updates. First article is regarding the custodial death in Tamil Nadu. The murder case of Jairaj and Benix at the hands of local police in Sattakulam, Tamil Nadu had provoked national outrage. The bare bones of the incidents are widely known. A smaller shopkeeper is picked up by the trivial offence, taken to the local police station. His son too is detained. Both are mercilessly trashed. The hospital to which they were taken admits that they have blood clots all over their body but gives a false certificate and fitness. The magistrate remands them to a judicial custody without examining their abused bodies, merely waiving consent from far away. Within a couple of days, the two succumb to their grievous injuries. State and the law. What does this reveal about the nature of the state and the link between the law and violence? The modern state emerged by gathering power dispersed among the rivalries along strongmen and depositing it in a single set of interrelated institutions now endowed with a monopoly of force and violence. These institutions were meant to function independently of the ruler. They do not belong to them or him, or nor part of his personal estate. Instead, they work for the entire public. The Jairaj and Benix case makes a doubt. If such a modern, impersonal state exists in India, it shows first that our political institutions, including the judicial machinery, are far from independent of will of the rules. Rather than they work at their personal command. Secondly, the local policemen think of themselves as sovereigns in their own little territory, executors of law they invent on the go. At the very least, they believe that they partake in sovereign powers protected by the lawmakers sitting higher up. Indian society continues to consist of rival power groups, each and every private police force at their mercy, forcing local populations to behave according to the rules crafted at will. If it is entire country is splintered into the little fight firms, each believing to have a monopoly and violence. The third, police brutality is routine, a banal feature of everyday life of the poor. The wanton actions of the police are woven into the fabric of daily social interactions. The police uniform plays a symbolic role, expressing that anyone who dons its power, prestige, and backing the entire official apparatus. Thus, the social superiority sanctions extra-legal behavior that often has a stamp of ramping criminality. After all, nothing done by the Santakulam police was the rule book. Everything that is from the last violent movement was extra-legal. Far from safeguarding the legal from illegal, the police embraced criminality. Jairaj and Benix appear to be a living non on the independent constitutional state, but under the local police state wrought in a colonial or pre-colonial era. The excessive force, undeniably, any system of law depends on the deployment of force, but it is use must be consistent and dignity of the person. Rule of law requires the presence of constraints on the excess. Excessive violence, for instance torture in a pursuit of information and confession, is illegal in most decent societies, yet Jairaj and Benix were the victims of surfeit of unwarranted violence. How does one explain the excessive use of force? Sadly, when a body is broken to bits and a face disfigured, there is not much left to the respect. To mutilate a body is to demand and humiliate it. Excessive violence is meant to convey that the life of the victim is truly worthless. Such humiliation is complete with the dismembered body which is made public. The European thinker Michael had argued that torture spectacles common in the medieval ages have been given away to the punishment in disciplinary institutions isolated from society. And as we know, public lynchings have not disappeared in our own times. Indeed, residual elements of the public display of violence are evident even in the Jairaj Benix case. Flogged in an enclosed public space, their bloodied bodies must have been brought to the hospital in a full public glare, and then taken to shown by the public magistrate, and when declared dead, publicly handed over to the family. So, what began an alleged minor offense turned into the grave crime as the body was slowly ripped apart. With each strike on the body by an iron rod, the enormity of the crime rose, and the impunity of the police action deepened, and the warnings of those others grew louder. Most of us, all mutilated bodies demonstrated the heavy price and descent. The purpose of brutality. In Thoothukudi, Tamil Nadu, surplus violence was inflicted with a distinct social and political purpose. In Saturday's feature, one of the article which was earlier published, Jairaj sympathetically went up to unpaid workers of the shop nearby, asking them to stand in the ground, even as an abusive policeman had thrashed or threatened to punish him if they did not disperse. Upon learning this, the police felt this open challenge their authority and an act of aggression, not just on the state but in a very person to person. From then on, the wrath knew no bounds. The Hindu also reported that the illegal sand mining and the sale of illicit liquor are common in that area. It appears that any form of the challenge to the police force that plays a key role in maintaining this corrupt and criminal order has to be dealt with swiftly and harshly. A crack in the system must not be allowed to open further. Will immediately authoritarian rule work by the fear of brooking no deviation. Jairaj and Benix unwittingly made the mistake of questioning the command of the local tyrant. Coming from the ordinary person, how can such a challenge be even brooked? The Jairaj and Benix case shows that without proper rule of law, we are all condemned to live in local tyrannies. How many more lives must we lose before the coercive impact of our collective life, the loss of freedom and dignity, is again acknowledged? This is regarding the police terror and the theatre of law regarding the Tamil Nadu custodial death. Next article is on India-China standoff, keeping an eye on a nuclear ball. Despite domestic and external challenges, there is now growing evidence that the People Republic of China continue to expand its nuclear arsenal, which was worrisome, but at the same time expand its nuclear arsenal. China is pursuing a planned modernization of its nuclear arsenal because it fears a multi-layered missile defense capabilities of the United States. It is aiming that its missiles and multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicle, that is MIRV, capabilities to neutralize America's missile shield. China's DF-31As, which are the Road Mobile Interconnection Ballistic Mobiles (ICBMs), are equipped with MIVRs and potent penetration aids. The estimates and what it means. The People Liberation Army Rocket Force (PLARF) also files a range of medium-range ballistic missiles and a short-range ballistic missile. The PRC's designated nuclear weapon states China's Lopnur was a site of Chinese subcritical testing since PRC adopted a moratorium on hot testing in 1996, enabling China to miniaturize warheads and develop a new design that have progressively integrated into the nuclear arsenal. The PRC is also set as a sizable inventory of fissile material. China, according to the International Panel of Fissile Material (IPFM), is estimated to possess a 2.9 plus or minus 0.6 metric ton of weapon grade plutonium, compared to India's 0.6 plus or minus 0.15 tons of weapon grade plutonium. China's expansion is a cause of concern because even the US and Russia are attempting to reduce the size of their respective arsenals. The PRC on the expansionist mode. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute observed that China's nuclear arsenal has risen from 290 warheads in 2019 to 320 warheads in 2020. This increase might not seem large relative on the size of nuclear arsenal of the US and Russia, but it indicates a gradual shift towards a larger arsenal. Present India the challenge because New Delhi has a contend with the nuclear-armed Pakistan as well. The Indian nuclear arsenal, according to the SIPRI, stand at a roughly of 150 nuclear warheads and Pakistan slightly ahead of 160 warheads. The China state-marked Global Times had recently called around 1000 warhead nuclear arsenal, underlying the motivation of the PLA and the hardline factions of the Communist Party of China to match US and Russia nuclear force levels. While these numbers are important, what equally, if not more consequently, from New Delhi is what China's nuclear modernization and diversified nuclear capabilities are like to do for conventional military escalation along the China-India border. The conventional military balance between the India and China forces along the line of actual control prevents or presents significant challenges of the Indian decision makers, given in the variegated and highly sophisticated nature of China nuclear capability relative to India. They gave Beijing considerable coercive leverage. Beijing could commit further aggression under the cover of its nuclear arsenal. Indeed, the PRC had already engaged nuclear signaling with set-piece videos, which has been doing in the rounds of social media platforms. The message is clear that New Delhi, from China's leadership, we have present you at the fate accompany. Accept it or move it. Beijing is communicating that an escalatory response from the New Delhi will incur punitive response from the China, mounting aggressive military actions at the several points at line of actual control. However, this time it will be more consequential, unlike in the last March-April when the People Liberation Army mounted a rapid tactical offensive to occupy a small territory of Pangong So and caught the Indian Army by surprise. Notwithstanding the efforts to escalate, particularly at patrolling point 14 of the Galwan River, Hot Springs and Gorga, Chinese ground units have consolidated their position in the Pangong So area and the entire stretch of line of actual control. To be sure, India is doing same, but the fingers 4 to finger 8 in a Pangong So, where the PLA is entrenched, the serious potential flagship or flag point of the Indian Army is looked into an eyeball-to-eyeball confrontation against the Chinese adversaries. There are more challenges for India. Consequently, Indian decision makers need to be aware of PLARF, a land-based missile forces. The PRC is believed to base a part of its nuclear arsenal in the inland territories such as the far western Xinjiang region, which is close to Akasi, Chin. China's land-based missiles are primarily road mobile and could play a key role in a larger area conventional offensive of the PLA might mount India forces along the line of actual control. There should be a guard. Thus, the conventional escalation between the China and Indian forces along the line of actual control must factor the role of nuclear weapons and the impact of military operations executed by the Indian Army and Indian Air Force. India's Strategic Forces Command (SFC) need to be heightened a state on the alert of the war of China's nuclear threats and brinkmanship as well to geared up to support India's conventional forces. While escalation of the China standoff between the India and China forces is not inevitable, it would be a terrible mistake on the part of Indian government to ignore the possibility because it might not come from the New Delhi but Beijing. Whatever the outcomes of the current crisis, New Delhi should start seriously assessing its extent of nuclear doctrine and redouble efforts to get robust strategic capabilities for deterrence. This is regarding keeping an eye on the nuclear ball at India regarding China-India standoff. The next article is on Kanye West entry to US presidential race. Rapper and hip-hop star Kanye West announced that he will join the US presidential race in November, a move that would, a theory, position him a challenger to incumbent Republican President Trump and Democratic rival from former Vice President Joe Biden. Mr. West has earlier alluded to having presidential ambitions, including when he explicitly indicated in 2015 MTV Video Music Awards his interest in standing for elections in 2020 and in November 2019 when he spoke about a bid in 2024. Nevertheless, his latest declaration as a vague Twitter post to realize the promise of America by trusting God, unifying our visions, and building our future is a bolt out and a blue considerations. Mr. West, a self-confessed admirer of Mr. Trump, has no known formal party affiliation or comprehensive policy agenda, and would have to scramble the file the paperwork necessary to get out in the ballot in the less than 4 months left to the election day. Little surprised then that this announcement has elicited more confusion than enthusiasm, barring the cause of Tesla Corporation's CEO Elon Musk, who promised Mr. West his full support. Even in the country that has seen a movie stars Ronald Reagan raised to the highest office in the land, the idea of the rap artist was zero political experience entering the Oval Office must appear far-fetched to many Americans. There are two interpretations of this odd turn in the presidential campaign. The first relates to the questions of tactics given to the visible West Trump bonhomie. It is far-fetched to the reason that within the campaign, Mr. West may serve as an undeclared surrogate of Mr. Trump, perhaps attracting to the campaign members of undecided or independent voters, even some of the minority groups. This might not have been hard to achieve. Mr. West stood for election and just before November 3rd and stood down in favor of Mr. Trump, effectively muddying the waters of Mr. Biden. The second is that the age of anti-intellectualism appears to be nearing its zenith in American politics. It's a well-worn adage in the US that people vote based on the candidate personality and not on the politics. It marks a new phase for this trend at this dark hour, and racial hatred, physical and economical insecurity on accounting of the devastating toll of COVID-19 as an accelerating slide in the US position as a global leader. The voting American populace is seriously considering its faith once again in poverty or property mogul who shot to the fame as a star of the TV reality show. A 43-year-old musician with no more than occasional incoherent ramblings to credit his appeals to the politics is not the only alternative. However, it is just as well there is another candidate in the fray. This is regarding the Kanye West entry to US presidential election with not more late. The next article is on the days of disengagement. After 2 months of the standoff along the line of actual control, news that India and China are discussing a full disengagement must be a welcome relief, but it is must tempered by the caution until the details of the plan to de-escalate the troops and tensions are clear. The conversation with the special representatives of India, NSA, Ajit Doval, and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Sunday, which led to the announcement, have given hostilities of a necessary pause. While the statement made in New Delhi and Beijing were not identical language, they largely conveyed on a consensus to restore pace and tranquility at the line of actual control. The next step will be to see the troops agreement carried out to ensure the Chinese troops withdraw as promised on each of the 3 points discussed. Galwan, Hot Springs and Golga. This is easier said to be done, as it was during the disengagement verification operation by the Indian troops, and the Galwan clash is believed to have occurred. After this, similar exercises will have to be undertaken for other points along the line of actual control. Disengagement and de-escalation must be accompanied by defined endpoints for troops to withdraw to ensure that they do not reoccupy positions vacated. Monday's statement that also set out courage of engagement. These include diplomatic and military parleys, meeting of the working mechanism for consultation and coordination of India-China border affairs, and further talks between the special representative. The government should inform the country about the progress as well as considered measure as the buffer zones, the patrolling free period, and the reasons for the decision to pull back Indian troops in the areas of disengagement. The government must also continue to work towards its stated goal of restoring the status quo ante and our position of the troops of situation in April before mobilization began. As the Prime Minister Modi's strong words at the Leh talk last week will have little meaning with the disengagement underway. There are also other important steps to consider. This is the first time the line of actual control has seen a casualties in over 4 decades, as the government cannot put aside the violent Galwan clash. For this, a full inquiry is needed to build up a clash and the circumstances surrounding the death of 20 Indian soldiers. The government must consider whether it will continue its course of economic countermeasures against China including banning of apps, investment restrictions, and import slowdown. This is regarding the days of disengagement, India and China standoff, how the special representatives of India and Chinese foreign minister agreed in conversations. The next article is on Bollywood many maladies. While nepotism is widely discussed, there is another structural injustice of the industry that needs to be addressed. The suicide of actor Sushant Singh Rajput had instigated a discussion on how certain individuals or family controls of the film industry and often exclude the outsider. There are allegations that certain powerful elites decide to flow the industry's economy and distribute the privileges without much concern for professional ethics. The allegations go that the talented artists suffer due to the nepotism in the industry. Sushant's death has ignited a critical discussion on many maladies in Bollywood, dominated by the social elites. The debate on nepotism also reveals other structural injustices in the industry. There is a lack of social diversity in Bollywood films, with the technical and artistic units being dominated by social elites. A discussion on Bollywood's middle class bias would be also demonstrate that the urban poor and the new neglected outsider in the multiplex business such exclusively has halted the improvisation of the cinema as social responsible art form. This dominated has excluded as the audience had disallowed Dalits, Bahujans and Adivasis to become the integral part of filmmaking process. First, the rhetoric, the cinema is mirror of the society, is untenable. The mainstream narratives of the film represent the taste and values of the social elites and visibly neglect the life stories of Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasis world. Instead, the popular Bollywood film project the culture, desires and social imaginations of the caste elites while veiling the terrible social realities of the majority of the people. The industry avoids hard questions on caste and social exclusion, even if such issues are explored on screen. Second, more than the relationship based on the nepotism, the economy functions with a conventional culture network which often disallows the outsider to enter. Dalits, Bahujans and Adivasis are considered as outsiders because they lack attributes of social networking and also require niche professional skills. Hindi films are written, directed, technically assisted and produced by a dominant set of clan and club members who are most socially elite. Even film critics, reviewers, historians and scholars on the cinema belong to the same socio-cultural groups. Filmmaking is an expensive and competitive market. In this post-liberalization period, the political economy of Bollywood has changed substantially. Now the corporate capital invests mainly on the popular names of any venture making cinema production and exclusive enterprises. The privileges and the profits of the businesses are therefore regulated through the well-knit social network that often based on the caste, regional and clan affiliations, often called a favoritism. Such an atmosphere undermines the creative instincts and a robust respect for artistic talent. It shows its limitations. It's in breaking the clutch of commercial logic and failed to produce cinema that can be honored by the global level for the creative motifs. Even in online streaming shows now, mediocrity is visible. Pushing away the poor. The poor working class audience is deliberately pushed away from the cinema viewing today. Films are specifically made to cater to the taste of the upper middle class audience, especially to those the capability spend 3 times more than average film goer. The multiplex culture has marginalized the single screen audience, mainly the poor. Hindi films, which earlier used to entertain and respond to the dreams and values of average Indian, are now categorically meant to the purpose specific kinds of surreal narratives, and some of the films are likable mainly to the new middle class educated audience. This is regarding the Bollywood has not addressed the popular criticism emerging from historically neglected groups. The concern of caste diversity on the screen and behind it has recently been debated within the Dalit circles, but it has yet been find a wider deliberative audience. Further, very few think that about the avenues to connect the poor audience to cinema again. When we are discussing the ills of nepotism in Bollywood, these partners, Maldives, also need equal diagnosis so that more comprehensive cue can be prescribed regarding the nepotism is widely discussed rather than a structural injustice in the industry that need to be addressed to. That's the end of article discussion. If you are first to my channel, I request you all to subscribe to my channel. This is my Insta, Wifi, Karo, and also Facebook page. I have given the links in the description. Please do subscribe so that you will be benefited. Thank you for your time on this channel. Have a great day.